A man destroys his own life the moment he chases something he hasn't first built the strength to walk away from. That is the truth most men avoid, because it forces them to confront the uncomfortable reality of who they actually are, not who they pretend to be. Before a man thinks about pursuing anyone, before he reaches out, before he invests his time, his energy, or his heart, he must first confront himself. Because the world does not reward the man who chases blindly, it rewards the man who stands firmly. Chasing is easy. Anyone can run. Anyone can panic. Anyone can cling to someone they fear losing. But the man who commands respect is the one who moves only when he is anchored in something deeper than impulse, when his actions come from conviction, not insecurity. You do not chase because you are incomplete. You move because your life is already built on foundations strong enough to support another human being. Before anything else matters, your values must be in order. A man who doesn't know what he stands for becomes a man who falls for anyone who gives him attention. And that kind of man isn't choosing, he's reacting. He's not pursuing, he's begging. And begging has never created attraction, respect, or lasting connection. If you do not stand for something within yourself, then every pursuit becomes a negotiation of your self-worth. You will bend where you should hold the line. You will justify behavior you should never tolerate. And you will call it love, when in truth it is fear disguised as devotion. A man must be able to walk away not as a tactic, not as a manipulation, but as a reflection of his standards. Walking away means you have learned to value yourself more than your desire to be chosen by someone else. It means you refuse to betray yourself for temporary validation. If someone cannot meet you where you stand, you do not shrink, you step back. Not because you are cold or detached, but because you refuse to participate in anything that requires you to abandon your integrity. But walking away is impossible unless you have cultivated purpose. A man without purpose chases people because he has nothing else to chase. His identity becomes dependent on who accepts him, who texts back, who stays, who leaves. He becomes a passenger in his own life, begging for control in the one place he should never surrender it, his relationships. When a man has no mission, every rejection feels like an attack on his existence. But when he is rooted in mission, rejection becomes nothing more than redirection. Purpose is not found in comfort, it is found in responsibility. You must build the habits, the discipline, and the structure that make you someone worth following. If your life is chaos, you will attract chaos. If your mind is unfocused, you will invite uncertainty. If your heart is desperate, you will choose situations that confirm your desperation. But if you cultivate order, internal order, then the way you pursue someone transforms. It becomes intentional, strong, patient, grounded. And here is the deepest truth. A man should only pursue when he knows he can handle the consequences of not being chosen. Because true pursuit requires courage, not craving. It requires the ability to say, I choose you, without silently whispering, please complete me. You pursue because you have something valuable to offer. You pursue with the understanding that you will be fine if it doesn't work. You pursue from abundance, not scarcity. Connection means nothing until your character backs it. Attraction means nothing if your boundaries collapse under pressure. Chemistry means nothing if your identity dissolves the moment you feel affection. You must become the kind of man whose attention is costly because your time is structured, your mind is disciplined, and your life is aligned. When a man reaches that point, pursuit becomes a choice, not a reaction. It becomes an extension of his strength, not a symptom of his weakness. There will always be moments when you feel the urge to chase. Your emotions will pressure you. Your ego will provoke you. Your fears will whisper that losing someone is worse than losing yourself. But you must resist that illusion. Losing yourself is the greatest loss. It ruins your capacity to lead, to love, and to grow. The moment you sacrifice your self-respect for someone else's approval, you compromise the very foundation that makes you worthy of connection in the first place. You chase only when your standards are matched. You chase only when your peace is not jeopardized. You chase only when your identity remains intact. That is when pursuit becomes strength. That is when connection becomes real. That is when you stop living like a man hoping to be chosen and start living like a man who chooses with clarity, courage, and purpose. A man is at his strongest not when he gets what he wants, but when he refuses to lose himself in the process of wanting it. If you understand that, you won't need to chase. You'll attract. A man's pursuit must come from inner clarity, not desperation. Because the moment a man moves from desperation, he loses the very power that makes him worth pursuing in return. Desperation is noise-loud, frantic, unstable. Clarity is signal-focused, grounded, and unmistakably strong. One leads you into chaos. the other leads you into direction. And the truth is simple. A man who hasn't mastered himself has no business trying to pursue anyone else. Before you reach outward, you must first build inward. Desperation comes from a void, a fear of being alone, a belief that you are not enough, a craving to be validated by someone else's attention. When your pursuit is rooted in that, every decision you make is warped. You tolerate disrespect. You chase inconsistency. You ignore red flags. You bend your principles just to keep someone near you. That isn't love. That isn't strength. That is the surrender of your identity in exchange for temporary comfort. And nothing destroys a man faster than betraying himself for the illusion of connection. Inner clarity, on the other hand, is built on self-respect. It begins when you decide that your peace is not for sale, your values are not negotiable, and your worth is not determined by who chooses you. Clarity means you know why you're moving towards someone, not because you're afraid of being alone, but because your values align, your standards match, and your principles are intact. It means you pursue with purpose, not panic, with intention, not insecurity, with strength, not scarcity. To reach that clarity, a man must first confront the parts of himself he tries to avoid, the insecurities he hides behind distractions, the loneliness he masks with constant communication, the lack of purpose he covers with romantic fantasies. When a man refuses to do that inner work, he becomes easy to manipulate, easy to mislead, easy to drain. His pursuit becomes a plea, choose me so I don't have to face myself. But the world does not reward a man who runs from himself. It rewards the man who dominates his own inner chaos. You gain clarity by taking responsibility for your life. You build discipline, not the shallow kind that fades with mood, but the deep kind that reshapes your character. You create a mission that outlasts emotion. You become someone who is driven by a higher standard, not by the fear of losing someone. Because if your identity collapses every time someone pulls away, it means you never had stability to begin with. Stability must be built before it can be shared. When your life has direction, you don't chase recklessly. You don't cling to people who threaten your peace. You don't sacrifice your progress to keep someone entertained. Your pursuit becomes selective because your time becomes valuable. A man with clarity does not run after every connection. He recognizes that connection without alignment is just a distraction. And a man committed to growth does not tolerate distractions that pull him away from who he is becoming. Clarity also requires boundaries, real ones, not the weak, half-spoken, easily broken boundaries of a man who fears conflict, but the solid, non-negotiable boundaries of a man who knows his worth. When you have boundaries, desperation dies. You no longer chase approval, you choose respect. You no longer fear loss. You understand that anything that collapses under the weight of standards was never meant to stay. Boundaries separate desire from dependence. They turn pursuit into strength instead of survival. A man with inner clarity is not pulled around by his emotions. He feels them deeply, but he doesn't obey them blindly. He knows attraction is powerful, but not more powerful than his principle. He knows loneliness is real, but not worth sacrificing his identity for. He knows desire is intoxicating, but not a good enough reason to abandon his mission. This is what makes him different from desperate men. He chooses with wisdom, not impulse. When a man pursues from clarity, he doesn't chase endlessly. He initiates with confidence, observes with patience, and chooses with discernment. If someone reciprocates, he builds. If they don't, he steps back with dignity, not as a tactic, but as a lifestyle. Because a man who respects himself will never beg for what requires him to shrink. He knows his value is proven through his actions, his purpose, and his consistency, not through his willingness to run after someone who isn't matching his effort. The strongest men are not the ones who never feel desire, they are the ones who can control it. They can appreciate someone deeply without losing themselves in the process. They can pursue with intention without becoming consumed by the outcome. They can invest without attaching their entire identity to whether it succeeds. That is the balance a man must cultivate: passion with discipline, desire with standards, connection with self-respect. A pursuit rooted in clarity leads to partnerships built on strength. A pursuit rooted in desperation leads to attachments built on fear. One elevates you, the other weakens you. One demands courage, the other demands self-betrayal. And a man must decide which version of himself he is willing to live as. Because the world sees the difference. People feel the difference. You project either stability or neediness, strength or scarcity, purpose or panic. Inner clarity makes you magnetic. It gives you a presence that cannot be faked. When you approach someone from that place, they feel groundedness, not grasping. They feel confidence, not craving. They feel direction, not dependence. And if they do not value that, you do not crumble, you walk away, because your clarity protects you from situations that require you to abandon your self-respect. A man's pursuit must come from inner clarity, not desperation, because clarity leads you toward what is right, while desperation drags you toward what will destroy you. When you understand this fully, you will stop chasing blindly and start choosing wisely, and that choice will shape the entire direction of your life. You only chase when your values align, not when your loneliness screams, because when loneliness takes control, it turns a man into a beggar for connection, dragging him towards situations that drain him instead of shaping him. Loneliness is loud, emotional, impulsive. It tells you to settle. It tells you to ignore your standards. It tells you to hold on to anyone who offers a little attention, even if they don't respect you, don't understand you, and don't match the man you are trying to become. But values your real, lived, non-negotiable values are quiet, steady, and powerful. They guide your decisions with clarity. They protect you from choices that look good in the moment, but destroy you in the long run. A man who chases out of loneliness is not choosing, he is escaping. He is running from the silence inside him, from the lack of purpose he refuses to confront, from the emotional emptiness he hopes someone else will fill. That kind of pursuit is weak, unstable, and easy to manipulate. When you chase from loneliness, you lower your standards to be accepted. You bend your boundaries to avoid rejection. You trade your self-respect for temporary comfort. And every time you do that, you lose a part of the man you were meant to become. A man must understand that connection is meaningless if it costs him his integrity. You never chase because you're afraid to be alone. You chase because something in the other person aligns with who you are and who you want to be. Values are the backbone of strong pursuit. They determine the quality of the relationships you form, the strength of the life you build, and the direction of your destiny. If someone's values do not match yours, the connection is only an emotional illusion, comfortable at first, damaging later. Values demand patience. Loneliness demands urgency. Values require understanding. Loneliness requires escape. Values strengthen your identity. Loneliness dissolves it. When your values lead your pursuit, you're not running blindly, you're choosing intentionally. You're observing whether their principles match your principles, whether their actions match your standards, whether their life aligns with the direction of your life. A man who values himself does not chase someone who threatens his peace, challenges his integrity, or undermines his mission. He only invests where alignment exists. Alignment means you see consistency, not confusion, effort, not excuses, respect, not convenience. It means the connection pulls you upward, not downward. It sharpens your purpose instead of distracting you from it. But loneliness doesn't care about alignment, it wants comfort now, even if you pay for it later. That is why a man must learn to master his loneliness before he pursues anyone. You cannot build a strong bond from a place of emotional emptiness. You cannot choose wisely when you're choosing to avoid your own reflection. The strongest men are those who can sit with emptiness without collapsing into desperation. They can feel loneliness without letting it dictate their decisions. They can desire connection without abandoning their principles. This emotional discipline is what separates men who build lasting relationships from men who fall into toxic attachments. If you cannot control your loneliness will control your life. A man must create a life that is full before he seeks someone to join it. That means developing purpose, structure, and internal strength. When you have direction, your loneliness loses its power. When you build discipline, chaos no longer appeals to you. When you have a mission, you stop wasting time on people who don't fit the future you're building. Values align easily when you're living by them. They feel natural, not forced. Loneliness, on the other hand, pushes you into situations that require you to shrink just to belong. If someone does not share your values, your principles, your respect, your vision, you do not chase, not because you are cold, but because you understand that misalignment always ends in resentment. When your values align, pursuit becomes powerful. You're not chasing for validation, you're moving with intention. You're not trying to be chosen, you're choosing. You're not trying to escape yourself, you're expanding yourself. A man who pursues with aligned values brings clarity, direction, and commitment, not desperation, fear, or emotional neediness. People often confuse desire with compatibility. They confuse attraction with alignment. They confuse connection with stability. But alignment is the real foundation. Attraction is temporary. Chemistry fluctuates. Feelings rise and fall. values remain. A relationship built on aligned values survives pressure. A relationship built on loneliness collapses under the smallest inconvenience. A man who leads with values becomes dangerous in the best way. His attention becomes refined. His energy becomes disciplined. His time becomes sacred. He does not waste his strength chasing people who show inconsistency. He does not negotiate his standards for approval. He does not cling to anyone who cannot match his emotional integrity. When a man lives by his values, his pursuit becomes rare, and what is rare becomes valuable. And here is the truth most men ignore. If you chase from loneliness, you will always chase. If you chase from alignment, you chase once with conviction. So you wait. You observe, you stay grounded. You control your emotions instead of letting them control you. You choose only when the connection strengthens your mission, aligns with your principles, and respects your identity. And when that alignment appears, then and only then do you pursue with strength, not desperation. Because a man who chases from loneliness loses himself. A man who chases from values finds the right person without abandoning who he is. You only chase when your values align, never when your loneliness screams. When you master that truth, your relationships elevate, your decisions sharpen, and your life transforms into something worthy of the man you have always wanted to become. Strength begins when you refuse to negotiate your self-respect. Because the moment you allow someone to cross a boundary you know should never be crossed, you teach the world how to treat you, and more importantly, you teach yourself what you believe you're worth. A man collapses not when life becomes difficult, but when he begins to bargain with his dignity, when he tolerates disrespect disguised as affection, when he accepts inconsistency because he fears loss, when he lowers his standards in the hope that someone will finally stay. That is the slow death of strength. And the man who allows it becomes a shadow of who he once was. Self-respect is the bedrock of personal power. It is the line that separates the man who leads his life from the man who is led by his circumstances. When you refuse to negotiate your self-respect, you become someone who cannot be manipulated, cannot be controlled, and cannot be broken by the shifting behavior of others. You stand in your identity, not in your insecurity. You choose truth over comfort, principles over approval, and boundaries over fear. That is where real strength begins, not in the gym, not in achievements, not in money, but in the quiet, firm, unshakable decision to honor yourself. The world will always test a man's boundaries. People will push to see what they can take from you. Situations will arise that tempt you to compromise. Someone you care about might pull you into emotional chaos. Someone you desire might try to convince you that your standards are too much, and loneliness may whisper that lowering your guard is better than being alone. But every time you choose self-respect over surrender, you strengthen your character, you reinforce your identity, you sharpen your vision of who you are and what you'll never allow again. Negotiating your self-respect never brings love, it only brings dependency. It attracts people who feed on your silence, your fear, your hesitation. When you abandon your boundaries, you become easy to use, easy to discard, easy to control. You lose your voice, your direction, and your sense of worth, and you tell yourself it's loyalty, or sacrifice, or patience, but deep down you know it's fear. Fear of being alone, fear of not finding better, fear of confronting the emptiness inside. But fear cannot be the compass of a strong man. Self-respect must be. Self-respect is not aggression. It's not arrogance. It's not a performance of strength. It is the real thing. It is quiet, calm, firm. It means you do not chase people who treat you as an option. You do not beg for clarity. You do not apologize for having standards. You do not allow disrespect to disguise itself as love. You know what you bring, and you refuse to let anyone make you question it. Strength grows when you say no to what insults your dignity. It grows when you walk away from what diminishes you. It grows when you decide you'd rather stand alone in truth than together in disrespect. Walking away is not a sign of weakness, it is the clearest expression of self-worth. Because a man who knows himself does not cling to situations where he has to shrink to be accepted. There is a version of you that emerges only when you stop seeking validation and start demanding alignment. When you stop accommodating people who drain you and start choosing people who respect you. When you stop trying to be liked and start living by your principles. That version of you is disciplined, focused, grounded. He attracts differently. He communicates differently. He carries himself differently. And the world responds to him differently. A man who respects himself becomes consistent. His standards become clear. His actions reflect his values. He stops tolerating mixed signals, disrespectful behavior, and emotional manipulation. He expects effort because he gives effort. He expects honesty because he lives honestly. He expects loyalty because he offers loyalty. Not from entitlement, but from alignment. Because his self-respect sets the baseline for everything in his life, relationships, work, purpose, growth. Strength is built in the decisions. No one sees the decision to let go when everything in you wants to hold on. The decision to stay silent when anger tries to push you into chaos. The decision to protect your peace instead of arguing for your worth. The decision to treat yourself with the respect you were never given. These decisions harden your character. They prepare you for a life that requires backbone, not weakness, clarity, not emotional chaos. When you stop negotiating your self-respect, you'll stop attracting situations that force you to. You stop repeating cycles that break you. You stop chasing people who make you question your value. You rise above the level of desperation you once lived in, and you finally see yourself clearly, not as someone who needs to prove his worth, but as someone who already has it. Strength begins when you refuse to negotiate your self-respect, because that refusal becomes the foundation for every powerful decision that follows. It shapes the relationships you choose, the opportunities you accept, and the future you build. It protects you from losing yourself in people, in emotions, in circumstances. It allows you to stand firm in your identity regardless of who stays, who leaves, who doubts, or who misunderstands. You become untouchable, not because life stops testing you, but because you stop betraying yourself. And the man who refuses to betray himself becomes unstoppable. Connection means nothing unless discipline and purpose stand behind it, because without the backbone of structure, responsibility, and direction, even the strongest emotions collapse under the weight of real life. Attraction can spark quickly, chemistry can feel intoxicating, and affection can grow fast, but none of it survives without the stability of a disciplined man who knows exactly where he's going and why. Connection alone is fragile. Purpose turns it into something powerful. Discipline turns it into something lasting. Without these two pillars, connection is just a moment. With them, it becomes a future. A man who relies only on connection is a man led by emotion instead of intention. He gets swept away by his feelings, consumed by impulses, and controlled by his desire to be understood. But emotion without direction creates chaos. It leads to miscommunication, confusion, and inconsistency. You end up investing in people who don't align with your values. You end up tolerating behaviors that destroy your peace. You end up sacrificing yourself simply to keep the connection alive. That is not strength. That is surrender. When discipline stands behind connection, everything changes. Discipline forces you to stay consistent. When your emotions try to pull you into weakness, it pushes you to communicate honestly, act with integrity, and stay aligned with your standards instead of bending for approval. Discipline is what keeps you grounded when the excitement fades. It's what helps you maintain clarity when attraction clouds your judgment. It's what separates a man who is prepared for a relationship from a man who simply wants attention. Purpose is equally essential. Without purpose, a man becomes a wanderer, drifting, adapting, bending, attaching himself to whoever gives him temporary meaning. He uses romance to distract himself from his lack of direction. He relies on connection to fill the void that comes from not knowing his own mission. But purpose makes a man solid. It gives him a path, a vision, and a standard. It prevents him from chasing people who don't fit the man he is becoming. It turns connection into a choice, not an escape. A connection built on emotion alone will always break, but a connection built on discipline and purpose becomes unshakable. When a man has discipline, he remains loyal to what he values even when it's difficult. When he has purpose, he chooses people who align with his direction, not those who pull him away from it. He creates stability through action, not words. He creates trust through consistency, not promises. He shows his character through choices, not feelings. A man with discipline and purpose doesn't allow chemistry to blind him. He pays attention to alignment. He observes patterns. He values actions over intentions. He protects his time and energy because they are the foundation of his mission. He does not pursue recklessly. He does not attach quickly. He does not fall into relationships that demand he abandon himself. Connection becomes meaningful only when it strengthens his path, not when it distracts him from it. And here is the truth. A connection that pulls you away from your purpose is not love, it is sabotage. A connection that weakens your discipline is not intimacy, it is dependency. A connection that demands your self-betrayal is not a gift, it is a trap. A man must understand that the quality of his relationships will always mirror the quality of his discipline. If he is inconsistent, he will attract inconsistency. If he is chaotic, he will attract chaos. If he has no standards, he will tolerate disrespect. But when he sharpens his discipline, he sharpens his relationships. When he strengthens his purpose, he elevates the kind of people who enter his life. Discipline and purpose reveal the truth about every connection. They expose who aligns with your direction and who only aligns with your loneliness. They show you who respects your mission and who resents it. They highlight who adds to your growth and who drains it. Without discipline, you ignore these signs. Without purpose, you misinterpret them. But with both, you see clearly. A connection that survives time, pressure, and difficulty is built by two people who carry discipline and purpose into the relationship, not just passion, not just affection, not just desire, but structure, vision, responsibility. These are the forces that hold everything together when emotions fluctuate. Strength in connection comes from the strength you build alone. It comes from your habits, your focus, your self-control. It comes from your refusal to abandon your principles for temporary gratification. A man who lacks discipline will fail his relationship long before the relationship fails him. A man who lacks purpose will lose himself in love long before love leaves him. But the man who lives with both becomes a foundation, steady, grounded, reliable. Connection is easy. Anyone can feel it. Anyone can crave it. Anyone can chase it. But building something meaningful requires discipline. Maintaining something lasting requires purpose. And choosing something aligned requires self-awareness. So you build yourself first. You strengthen your habits. You sharpen your mission. You become someone whose life has structure, direction, and meaning. And from that place, you connect not because you need completion, but because you offer stability. Not because you fear being alone, but because you desire alignment. Not because you chase affection, but because you choose partnership. Connection means nothing unless discipline and purpose stand behind it. Because these are the forces that turn a moment into a bond into a commitment, and a commitment into a life worth living. You said, you only chase when your values align, not when your loneliness screams. Strong starts line, expend it, and don't heading in 800 words. ChatGPT said, you only chase when your values align, not when your loneliness screams. Because the moment you let loneliness speak louder than your principles, you step into a version of yourself that is weak, reactive, and easily pulled into situations that steal your peace. Loneliness is persuasive. It whispers that any connection is better than none. It pushes you toward people who don't honor you, who don't share your path, who don't reflect your standards. It convinces you to cling, to settle, to tolerate the bare minimum. But a man who lets loneliness lead him loses the clarity that protects his future. Yet, a man who lives by his values becomes unshakable. He chooses connection with intention, not desperation. Values are the compass that keep you steady when emotions try to drag you off course. They are the guardrails that protect you from chasing what looks good in the moment, but destroys you slowly. When a man honors his values, he does not chase someone simply because he feels alone at night. He doesn't pursue because he's craving affection or scared of silence. He moves only when there is alignment, when the connection strengthens who he is, not weakens him. That kind of pursuit is powerful. That kind of pursuit is rare. That kind of pursuit is chosen, not needed. Loneliness clouds judgment. It makes you read potential where there is only inconsistency. It makes you justify red flags because you fear emptiness more than you fear the consequences of staying attached to the wrong person. It makes you invest in someone who shows attention instead of someone who shows respect. That is why loneliness cannot guide your decisions. It trades long-term peace for short-term comfort. It blinds you to incompatibility. It convinces you to ignore the very standards that were meant to protect your heart and your future. A man must learn to endure loneliness without collapsing into desperation. The strength to sit with yourself is what shapes the strength to choose wisely. When you are not afraid of being alone, you become impossible to manipulate. When you no longer need attention to feel valuable, you stop pursuing people who don't match your character. When you build a life rooted in purpose, discipline, and internal alignment, loneliness loses its grip on you. You stop chasing people to fill the spaces you refuse to fill yourself. Choosing based on values is different. It is patient. It is thoughtful. It is grounded. You look at how someone lives, not how they make you feel in a fleeting moment. You examine their consistency, not their charm. You observe their actions, not their promises. You compare their direction to your direction. Do your paths move in the same way? Do your standards mirror each other? Do your principles align? Or will you constantly be negotiating your worth just to keep the connection alive? A man who leads with values cannot be seduced by temporary comfort. He He is drawn only to what matches his trajectory. Alignment empowers a man's pursuit. When your values align with someone else's, the pursuit becomes natural, never forced, never chaotic. You don't chase to avoid emptiness. You pursue because the connection enhances your purpose, not distracts from it. You don't chase to be validated. You pursue because your effort is matched, your energy is respected, your presence is valued. This is what makes alignment powerful. It clarifies the difference between emotional craving and genuine compatibility. You must understand, the people who match your values won't require you to shrink. They won't pressure you to abandon your mission. They won't pull you into drama, confusion, or emotional inconsistency. They will create stability, not turbulence. They will respect the standards you worked hard to build. They will walk with you, not drag you off your path. When your values align, connection becomes a source of strength, not weakness. A man who chases out of loneliness always ends up lost. He becomes dependent on the relationship for identity. He becomes addicted to validation. He becomes reactive to the smallest shifts in attention. But a man who chases only when his values align moves with intention. He remains in control of his life, his emotions, and his direction. He offers effort without losing himself. He pursues without surrendering his mission. He connects without abandoning his boundaries. There will be moments when loneliness tries to convince you to settle. Moments where silence feels unbearable. Moments where you question your standards because the world seems full of people who don't meet them. But in these moments, you must remind yourself that temporary relief is not worth permanent regret. A connection built on loneliness will drain you. A connection built on alignment will elevate you. So, you wait not out of fear, but out of wisdom. You strengthen your values so deeply that they become the filter for every relationship in your life. You build a life so rich in purpose that your worth is not tied to who stays or who leaves. You cultivate discipline so sharp that no amount of loneliness can make you compromise your dignity. And from that place, you pursue only what reflects the man you are becoming. You only chase when your values align, not when your loneliness screams, because alignment leads to growth while loneliness leads to destruction. One builds your future, the other steals it. Choose the version of yourself that honors your standards, not the one that betrays them. That choice is what separates a desperate man from a powerful one. Strength begins when you refuse to negotiate your self-respect. Strength is not built in the moments when life is easy. It's forged in the moments when something or someone tries to pull you away from who you are, and you decide you will not move. It begins the first time you look at a situation that promises comfort, validation, or attention, and you walk away because the price is too high, your dignity. That is the moment a man stops being shaped by his circumstances and starts shaping them himself. The world will always test you. It will tempt you with shortcuts, with people who like the version of you that bends, with opportunities that glitter but ask you to silence your instincts. And the truth is, anyone can say they want strength, discipline, confidence. Those words are easy. What's hard is making choices that protect your self-respect when every fiber in your body wants approval, closeness, or escape. Strength is not loud. It's not a performance. It's the silent refusal to betray your deepest standards, even when no one is watching, and no one will praise you for it. A man becomes weak the moment he starts negotiating with himself, the moment he convinces himself that lowering his standards just this once won't matter, the moment he accepts treatment he knows is beneath him, the moment he prioritizes comfort over character. Each compromise seems small, insignificant, harmless, but they stack, they accumulate, and eventually, you wake up one day unable to recognize the person staring back at you, not because the world broke you, but because you allowed the slow erosion of your own integrity. Strength is not built through bravado. It's built through boundaries. It's built when you say no to situations that drain you, to relationships that diminish you, to environments that dull your potential. People think boundaries push others away. In reality, they protect the path you're building. They keep you aligned with your purpose instead of scattered across the expectations of everyone else. Boundaries are not walls. They are declarations of what you will and will not accept, and without them, your life becomes shaped by the demands of others instead of the direction of your own vision. Self-respect is not something you stumble into. It is a discipline. It requires honesty, brutal honesty about the moments you betrayed yourself in the past. It demands responsibility for the times you abandoned your own standards because you wanted to be loved, accepted, or seen. Without that honesty, you will always repeat the same patterns, drawn back into situations where your worth becomes negotiable. Strength begins when you stop lying to yourself about what you need, who you are, and how far you've drifted from your own expectation. When you refuse to negotiate your self-respect, something powerful happens. You stop chasing what was never meant for you. You stop clinging to people who only stay if you shrink. You stop tolerating disrespect disguised as affection. You stop trying to earn what should be naturally reciprocated. You step into a different level of living, not because you become harder, but because you become clearer. You know what aligns with your values. You know what honors your purpose. You know what reflects the man you are becoming. And suddenly, the world becomes a place where you choose rather than beg. Strength is not the absence of emotion. It's the refusal to let those emotions dictate your worth. It's the refusal to let loneliness make your decisions for you. It's the refusal to let fear of loss convince you to accept less than you deserve. You cannot build a powerful life if every discomfort pushes you toward compromise. You cannot build a meaningful connection if your self-respect is a currency you trade to keep someone close. The world respects the man who respects himself first, and yes, walking away hurts. Holding your standard when you want to bend hurts. Choosing growth over comfort hurts. But that pain is not your enemy. It's your teacher. It's the fire that shapes iron into strength. Every time you endure that pain without abandoning yourself, you carve another layer of discipline, another layer of clarity, another layer of power into your character. Strength is built in silence, but it echoes loudly through your choices. And the world eventually responds. People treat you differently. Opportunities align differently. Life moves around you, not over you. But it all begins with one decision, simple, difficult, and transformative. You refuse to negotiate your self-respect. That is the beginning of strength. That is the foundation of a powerful man. Connection means nothing unless discipline and purpose stand behind it. Connection alone is easy. Anyone can feel chemistry, attraction, excitement. Anyone can be pulled towards someone who lights up their emotions for a moment. But that spark means nothing, absolutely nothing, if the person behind it has no direction, no discipline, and no internal structure holding their life upright. A connection without purpose is just a sensation. A connection without discipline is just a distraction. And a man who lives off distraction cannot build anything that lasts. We live in a world where emotion is treated like certainty, where a strong feeling is mistaken for a strong foundation. But connection cannot replace character. It cannot substitute for daily commitment. It cannot stand in for the work you avoid. People chase connection because it feels warm, validating, comforting. But connection without purpose is temporary, and connection without discipline collapses as soon as pressure arrives. If you have nothing anchoring you from within, every relationship becomes unstable, unbalanced, and unpredictable. It's easy to be charming when nothing is asked of you. It's easy to be affectionate when everything is going well. It's easy to feel connected when life isn't demanding growth. But real connection requires something deeper, someone who can stand in their own truth, regulate their impulses, and stay committed to the path they've chosen even when emotions surge. Without that inner stability, connection becomes dependency. It becomes a way to escape your life instead of build it. Discipline is the backbone that supports every meaningful connection. It shapes how you show up. It determines whether you communicate with clarity or chaos. It decides whether you react impulsively or respond intentionally. Discipline keeps your emotions steady instead of letting them hijack your actions. It ensures that when challenges appear, as they always do, you don't crumble, withdraw, or lose yourself. Without discipline, even the strongest chemistry eventually turns into conflict, confusion, and disappointment. Purpose is equally essential. When you live without direction, you inevitably use connection to fill the emptiness. You seek closeness not because you're ready to share your life, but because you're trying to distract yourself from the fact that you don't know where you're going. You turn relationships into a refuge from your own unfinished work. And when a man does that, he becomes needy, reactive, inconsistent. He clings instead of leads. He follows emotion instead of vision. He shapes himself around connection instead of shaping his life around his purpose. But when purpose leads, everything changes. You no longer chase people, you attract the ones who resonate with your path. You no longer fear losing someone, you fear losing yourself. You no longer make decisions from insecurity, you make them from clarity. Purpose gives you direction, and direction gives your relationships meaning. You're no longer grasping for connection to feel whole, you're sharing your fullness with someone who sees it, respects it, and grows alongside it. A connection grounded in discipline and purpose becomes something entirely different. It becomes stable, resilient, and deeply rooted. It's not about intensity, it's about alignment. It's not about constant excitement, It's about consistent commitment. It's not about avoiding conflict, it's about handling conflict with maturity, patience, and strength. Discipline shapes how you love. Purpose shapes why you love. Together, they transform connection into partnership. When a man lacks discipline, he becomes unreliable. When he lacks purpose, he becomes directionless, and no amount of affection, chemistry, or emotional closeness can compensate for that. Connection alone cannot carry the weight of an undisciplined life. It cannot stabilize a man who hasn't stabilized himself. It cannot give meaning to a path he hasn't defined. And deep down, he knows it. That's why men without purpose feel restless in relationships that are trying to build on ground that is still shifting beneath them. True strength reveals itself in the ability to hold your course while you hold someone's hand, to maintain your discipline, even when connection is tempting you to relax, to stay committed to your mission, even when emotions try to pull you away from it. Love is not meant to replace purpose, it's meant to support it. Connection is not meant to be your anchor. It's meant to be a companion to the anchor you've already forged within yourself. When discipline and purpose stand behind your connection, you show up differently. You communicate with intention instead of insecurity. You set boundaries not to create distance, but to protect your direction. You love without losing yourself. You give without emptying yourself. You commit without collapsing under pressure. And because your life is aligned, your presence becomes steady, something rare, something valuable, something unmistakably strong. Connection without discipline is chaos. Connection without purpose is drifting. But connection backed by both becomes a force stable, grounded, and capable of enduring anything. It doesn't fade because emotions shift. It doesn't break because challenges arise. It stands firm because the person behind it stands firm. The connection you build with another person will always reflect the connection you've built with yourself. If your life is disciplined, your love will be clear. If your purpose is strong, your relationship will be meaningful. Connection means nothing unless it is supported by the structure of the man behind it. Build that structure. Strengthen it daily. Then let connection enhance your life, not define it.